It's Wednesday, August 3rd. Welcome to this week's edition of CT Pulse on the HAN Network. I'm Kate Czaplinski with Josh Fisher. And Josh, our guest today, Yvonne Klein, is joining us from the Connecticut Department of Housing. We're going to be talking about veteran homelessness, ending chronic homelessness, and getting more into the struggles surrounding creating more affordable housing in Connecticut.
That's right. We're also going to be talking about some other news happening up in Hartford and across the state today. And Doug Smith, of course, will be by later on to give us his take on the week's news and his editorial cartoons.
That's right.
But first we want to bring on Yvonne Klein, who's the state commissioner of the Department of Housing. Here's the first commissioner of that department. Yvonne was the 3-term, 6-year first selectman in Darien, a Democrat, and at that point Darien was the most Republican town in Connecticut. So
quite an accomplishment.
Yes, that's right.
Yvonne, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So Yvonne, you just sent out a press release this morning about ending homelessness, veteran homelessness in Connecticut. Connecticut was rated the first state by the federal government to end the chronic homelessness of vets. How did you get involved in that, and how did Connecticut become the first state to do that?
Well, a lot of hard work, but how we became involved is the First Lady initiated the Mayor's Challenge, which was to end veteran homelessness by the end of 2015. So Governor Malloy signed on, and he took on the Mayor's Challenge. He was one of only, I believe, 4 governors to take on the Mayor's Challenge as a governor. So what we did, and I have to say, I'm very proud to say that Connecticut was the first state to be recognized as ending chronic homelessness among veterans by the end of 2015. By August of 2015, we hit that mark last August, and we were the second state to effectively end homelessness among veterans for 2015. So we were proud that the president thanked our state in our accomplishment on Monday in his address. So we've done this with a great deal of hard work and coordination among our federal partners, our state partners, providers on the ground, non-governmental partners. And essentially what we've done in the state of Connecticut is to create a system where we can quickly identify then it was homeless veterans, and we'll continue to do that, quickly identify homeless veterans and quickly move them into permanent housing. And we were doing this, we've got a timeline, and this was all established by the federal government, and we were doing this in less than 90 days, which is quite remarkable and certainly helpful to these folks. So we improved our outreach to veterans who were homeless, just continued more outreach, coordinated all of our providers, and we developed a system created a coordinated access network system that allowed us to assess the needs of not only our veterans but other homeless individuals, and we certainly can get into that, and I'll talk about my letter that I sent out today. So we're very proud. As the First Lady said, someone who comes home, who has served our country and comes home and kisses the ground should not sleep on the ground. So we're proud to have done our part here in Connecticut, and we will continue our efforts here. So it doesn't mean we will never have another homeless veteran. What this means is that we are able to quickly identify them and move them into permanent housing very quickly.
Now, obviously, ending veteran homelessness, it's something that everyone could get behind, no matter what party you're part of. Yes. So why do you think it took so long to maybe put that in place finally and make those changes that needed to happen?
Well, I think what's happened, we've learned a great deal over the years on addressing homelessness. So a couple of things have happened on the national and state level. Number one, what we've learned is to be housing first. So Connecticut is a housing first state. So implementing, number one, that philosophy, if you will. Number two, learning what best practices are to go along with housing first. So what we know is that when someone is placed into housing, they can get a job, they can keep a job. But think about that. The simplest thing, when you fill out an employment application and it asks for your address and you don't have an address, now you do. So very simple. When you have a home to go home to, you can prepare for work, you can get ready for work. If you have children, your children go to school with a greater frequency, have a place to do their homework. There's stability, and the important piece of that is having an affordable home. And as you had mentioned, I had sent out a letter today to mayors and first selectmen to ask them to take the pledge for Zero 2016, which is to end chronic homelessness in Connecticut by the end of this calendar year. So it's August, we're entering our final push. We've done some great work. Our providers have done the same providers who work to end homelessness among veterans are the same providers who are working to end chronic homelessness. And chronic homelessness, as you know, is something that is very challenging to end. Although we feel, and from what we know today, we do believe we will be successful in those our efforts. Chronically homeless individuals are those who have been homeless for a year or more, or have had 3 or more episodes of being homeless that add up to being homeless for a year, and often have some sort of disability. So those are the folks who need the support services. And but again, we have a system in place that allows us to rapidly house these families, these individuals and families. And I'm proud to say, sending out this letter, we had done so early on in the year, and most of Fairfield County mayors and first selectmen have signed on, and they've taken the pledge. So, and of course other municipalities across the state have too, but here we are, we're in our final push to end chronic homelessness. So the more support, the more awareness that we can create, I think the easier for us to reach our goal.
How do you find, could you just give us a quick example of how you identify a homeless vet and how you help them find housing, and then do you help them find a job also, and what's involved in that?
Well, so a number of different ways. Some folks may present in a shelter, some folks may call 211, which
Right.
is incredibly important to finding housing. In doing outreach, when we do our annual point in time count, that might be an opportunity where we find folks and a veteran might identify themselves. The simple thing that we have changed, what we found is that veterans did not identify themselves when they called 211 or presented in a shelter.
Okay.
So something very simple as asking, "Are you a veteran?"
Right.
has changed the face of identification, number one. So typically what we would do is, and of course the VA is involved in this process, and our VA housing providers are also involved in assessing a veteran and then matching them with housing. So we do an assessment, we conduct an assessment to understand the type of supports a veteran may need. Sometimes we will put them in in temporary housing, and during that time, and that was also an interesting change and a small change that made a difference. When we were placing veterans in temporary housing, nothing was really happening. I mean, they had a place to go, but during that time now, we do work with them on job training and assistance to find a job. So, our role, we typically work primarily with housing providers, but there are other services that we will match up with the veteran once they're identified. But we're primarily housing.
So is some of that, I mean, obviously maybe some veterans who have ended up on the streets might suffer some medical issues or mental health issues. Right. So is there a partnering of them with those services?
Absolutely. That's where we coordinate all of our providers together and link those folks up with the appropriate support services. And what we found is, again, in the past, what the practice is, well, when you find a job, we'll find you a home. If you had a substance abuse issue, when you get and stay sober, we'll find you a home. We were not successful in that. So now, housing first, and then providing the wraparound services, people are more successful in their lives. And that's really what this is all about. Linking people up with housing so they can get on to lead more productive lives, plant roots and become members and productive members of a community.
Now, you mentioned in your press release today that it costs the state about $33,000 annually per homeless individual,
Yes.
and $122,000 annually per homeless family. Where does that cost break down? What are those costs?
So what those costs are, what we find is when people are homeless, they often cycle in and out of expensive public systems. So whether it's using the ER for a cold, or I have a stomach ache, right? So that's extremely expensive. Oftentimes prison, folks just winding up back in jail, over and over again. So it's the use of public systems where it's more costly. Whereas when you place someone in a home, again, they are able to get their job, keep their job, and become more self-reliant and go to the doctor instead of the ER. So that's where all of those costs come in. And when we look at a state, it's actually in the hundreds of millions of dollars, because we really start to look at the loss of revenue. So the numbers become even more interesting when you look at the true cost of homelessness.
Wow. So can we move on now to affordable housing, or what was your plan
Well,
there, Kate?
I think we could take a break before we do that,
Okay.
but just want to mention, as you mentioned
Kate's always
earlier,
in charge, Yvonne,
I'm in charge,
so,
Yvonne, yeah.
I don't
worry about
I
it.
don't want to upset her.
But as Josh mentioned, you kind of formed this department. This was a somewhat new department. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, happy to. So the Department of Housing is 3 years old, and I've been in the position since day one. And the housing years ago, decades ago, was a standalone department, which sort of got eaten up by economic development, or economic and community development. So when Governor Malloy came into office, many folks are familiar with his commitment and all the great work he has done to expand affordable housing as his time as mayor in Stamford. So housing was a priority for him when he took office. And we eventually had the legislature pass legislation to form a standalone department. So the development programs that were in economic and community development are now in the Department of Housing. The housing support programs, such as the Section 8 vouchers, state rental assistance, funding for shelters, and other support funding that were in the Department of Social Services, are now in the Department of Housing, and we have other housing programs that were in OPM in the Department of Mental Health that are now in the Department of Housing. So it's really created what some folks were looking for, more predictability in funding for development, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, and also the ability to communicate better about what our housing needs are. So creating this department has been incredible, and there's been certainly an element of fun in creating the department, but in building that department, pulling in providers, advocates, other commissioners, mayors, first selectmen, planning and zoning officials, really hearing from them what the needs are on the ground, and fashioning the department, if you will, to address those needs, be more user-friendly. As a former first selectman, I didn't like the bureaucracy, and I've worked hard to try and eliminate as much bureaucracy in my department as possible, and will continue to do so. So it's been great to form the department, and it's certainly a creative endeavor.
So, and I covered you, Yvonne, for 4 years, at least your last 2 terms as first selectman when I was editor of the Darien Times, and I got to know you rather well because you're like a policy wonk. You really like to get into the details. Yeah. And I saw what you did with the Board of Selectmen, whether it was a Democratic majority or a Republican majority. You did a really good job of always plowing through.
Thank you.
I think setting aside on setting goals for yourself and the board. So you must really be enjoying your work here, because it's a new department. I mean, we can still call it new. It's only 3 years old. So what have you been getting out of this newish role for you up in Hartford?
Well, I have to say that I've always felt very privileged and honored when I was a first selectman to serve our residents in Darien, and I feel the same way serving as a commissioner. I believe myself to be a public servant, and that service piece is very important to me. So it allows, I think, it allows me professionally to be creative and to make a difference in the lives of so many people that we serve, as whether you're an elected official or an appointed official.
Right.
Well, we're going to step out for a break, but Yvonne's going to stay with us. When we come back, we're going to get more into affordable housing, some of the challenges in creating more affordable housing in Connecticut, coming up on CT Pulse after this. Have a sports injury or a slip and fall that needs immediate care? Coastal Ortho Express Urgent Care gives you direct access to an orthopedic specialist fast, without an appointment. Biking, golf, tennis, soccer, whatever the sports injury is, sprain or fracture, Coastal Ortho Express can help. Coastal Ortho Express Urgent Care, open Monday through Saturday, now in 2 locations. The iPark building at 761 Main Avenue in Norwalk and 36 Old Kings Highway South in Darien. Or go to coastalorthoexpress.com, like them on Facebook.
Warm weather, light breezes, boats are in the water. There's no better place to celebrate summer than the Dock Shop. Whether in Darien at 51 Tokenique Road or Westport at 609 Riverside Avenue, the Dock Shop is where you'll find everything you need to kick off summer. From the latest summer apparel to the newest fishing tackle, the Dock Shop will help you get the most out of your next beach day or harbor cruise. At the Dock Shop, you'll find a wonderful selection of items made in the USA and right here in New England, all with a distinct nautical flair. Boater, beach bum, fisherman, or simply love the coastal lifestyle, this is a unique place to shop. DockShop.com.
For more than 50 years, Triple S has been Fairfield County's expert service for carpet, upholstery, and drapery cleaning. We provide the best in repairs and in-depth restoration, understanding fabrics and how to properly clean and restore them. Our staff will come to your home to clean your wall-to-wall carpet to perfection. We can also pick up your fine carpets and bring them to our facilities. With locations in Norwalk, Stamford, and Stratford, Triple S will get the job done fast, big or small. At Triple S, you can count on our people as well as our cleaning. Find us at triplesclean.com or 203-847-8000.
I'm John Kovach. I'm a newspaper editor. I'm a high school football coach. I'm a television presenter. And I want you to love fishing as much as I do. Tune in to Yankee Fisherman, Thursdays at 1 on the HAN network. It's like going to the tackle shop without leaving your office.
You're watching the HAN network, and you're not alone. More than 1.5 million viewers have watched our live sports, news, and entertainment broadcasting since the network launched in August 2015. Advertise on the network that reaches Fairfield County, Connecticut's most engaged audience. Contact Advertising Director Jessica Murrin at 203-273-7312 or email jessica@han.network.
We're back on this week's edition of CT Pulse on the HAN Network. Kate Czaplinski, Josh Fisher, and we're joined in studio by Commissioner Yvonne Klein of the Connecticut Department of Housing. And Josh, off air, we were just talking about kind of some of the things that make Connecticut government unique that might also affect Commissioner Klein's job. But let's talk about that a little bit.
It's certainly something that all of us who have either grown up or lived in Connecticut for a long time know. We don't have county government, and I know whenever I talk to family members or anyone who lives elsewhere, they're surprised. And as you pointed out, Yvonne, Rhode Island's the only other state in the nation that doesn't have county government. Of course, Rhode Island's also about a quarter the size of Connecticut. So there's 169 municipalities in Connecticut, and the Affordable Housing Law 8-30G deals with zoning a lot, and each town has their own special zoning laws. And we've seen a lot of different battles between whether it's a planning and zoning commission or a planning board. Battling with developers who want to build affordable housing using the 8-30G law. Does it help you, or does it hurt you, or how does it, as commissioner, to deal with 169 different law books?
Well, it certainly makes the job more challenging to understand and try to understand and try to get familiar with 169 municipalities. But having grown up in Connecticut and lived in Connecticut and served as a municipal leader, I certainly, that's really what I'm used to.
Right.
So it's just really working, knowing what I know, and I don't sort of buck the system in a way. Right. So working with municipal leaders, that's certainly been doable. And part of what I do as commissioner is to reach out to municipal leaders and meet with them. I started that when I first took the job, really to say, the Department of Housing is here, we have funding, this is what we're doing, let's talk about affordable housing, let's learn about your needs, how can we help you, and establish a back and forth. So many cases that has been very successful, and we've got great relationships with mayors and first selectmen who recognize the need in their municipality that they need to build affordable housing, and how can they get state funding, what's our process, and how we can give them guidance in that effort. So you've mentioned that infamous state statute, 830G, and I look at it, and I've always looked at it a little bit differently. It's about the needs of a municipality, statute or no statute. Every municipality in the state of Connecticut needs affordable housing. There are residents there who are struggling. There are residents there who may need to leave because there's no affordable housing. So when you think about a municipality, you think about a vibrancy. You think about multi-generational. And what we see, and in spite of some of the press, the older folks are leaving. It's not the old folks who are leaving. When you look at the real numbers, it's the younger folks who are leaving. And part of our issue is housing affordability. So our recognition and what we hear from chief elected officials is that, how do we get our young folks to stay or come back? What do we do for our workforce? In Fairfield County and New Haven counties, we have these great main streets and we have these great downtowns. Many of our municipalities have assisted living and nursing homes. So start to think about the service organizations that we all have. So how do we attract and keep that workforce? So, incredibly important to have housing that is market rate and that is affordable, so that we can, think about it, keep our young folks, we can attract and maintain a workforce at all levels, and our seniors, keep our seniors in the communities where in many cases they've lived there for 60 years but can't afford the upkeep of a home. So this is an incredibly important need across the state.
Now, are there any particular zoning laws in some cities or towns that you think of that can really harm affordable housing moving forward?
Yes, there are some municipalities still in 2016 that don't allow any multifamily zoning at all. There are some municipalities that are 2-acre zoning. So clearly density requirements are an issue in this state. So the more flexible, the more future thinking your zoning allows you to have more and diverse development. Many folks think about affordable housing and they think about the big box housing that was built in 1960 something and put in a corner someplace and never again to be rehabbed or anything. Right. That's not what we're building in the later part of the 20th century and the 21st century. We are building more mixed income, mixed use housing, which is incredibly, incredibly important to do. One of our goals, and certainly when we talk about the mission of the department, is to create a more affordable housing in vibrant and strong communities, but also inclusive communities. So that's how we're thinking. Another one of our goals is to change the development culture. So when a developer goes to build a development, they're thinking about who all should be living here. So, and we've done this in a number of ways by identifying in our process, we'd like to see veteran units, low income units, units for folks who are developmentally disabled, units for people who have physical disabilities. So we've adopted universal design standards. So, think about who we are as a community, what our neighborhoods look like, and to think more inclusively in our developments.
Do you think a big perception is, in some towns, because 8-30G, that law says if your town doesn't have 10% of your housing stock is not classified as affordable, then developers can overstep local zoning laws to build housing that contains about 1/3 of it affordable. And when you were first selectman in Darien, for example, there was a rather famous case that even the New York Times was covering it of the Chris Stefanoni and his wife Margaret were proposing housing on Nearwater Lane, which is the road you take down to get to the beach, off of the Post Road, and they wanted to build affordable housing on one of the lots there, which certainly upset the neighbors. And then you get a lot of NIMBY action here. But, that spot certainly didn't seem like it wasn't a transit-oriented development, area. And so you get a lot of pushback from people in, neighborhoods like that. Fair or not, that's what it happened. But does it make sense, because that law too, because if you build that housing and 2/3 of it isn't affordable, you're actually decreasing your percentage of affordable housing that you have in town when you add that in. So it always just seemed like that law is very developer. It's very friendly to developers and not necessarily friendly to taxpayers.
Well, again, it's about addressing needs. So I always like to circle back to, we're addressing needs of residents in municipalities, needs of residents in our state. And I don't view it as developer friendly or municipality friendly. This law was written for a couple of reasons: to combat exclusionary zoning, and number two, to get private developers actually to pay for affordable housing, where you didn't only need governmental assisted affordable housing. So we've gotten 4,000 plus units out of that, whatever that's, and that doesn't mean that those units came out of court cases.
Right.
So just the mere existence of that statute, it did produce thousands of units. So you raised an issue about the importance of building affordable housing near transit, and typically affordable housing is multifamily or clustered housing, so where that's appropriate to be built. Again, just focusing on near transit, near jobs, on main roads, mixed income, mixed use developments are clearly, if you will, the healthiest developments in terms of community development, in terms of economic development. So again, just thinking broader about how affordable housing can fit into a municipality, the needs, and from an economic and a community development perspective. I hope that hit your point.
Yeah,
you
no,
had
it
a
does.
number of points there.
It's a very complex thing, and but to me, it always made more sense that a city like Stamford is much friendlier or nicer place to have affordable housing, because you have 95 in the Merritt, you have a busy train station, you have a bus system, as opposed to like Canaan, Connecticut, up in the northwest corner, where you have a couple traffic lights. No offense to the good people of Canaan, but
and I've been to Canaan.
I think I went to camp there once years ago. But and even like a town like Darien or New Canaan makes more sense a little bit for some affordable housing versus a town like Weston, where you have an exit off of the Merritt, but that's it. And and obviously the more affordable housing we have in particularly Lower Fairfield County, you could have a ripple effect that'd be better for traffic too. Because I know I live in Stamford, and when I drive home from our studio here in Shelton, you see the traffic backed up all the way from exit 44 down to the state line, and it's all those people because they're driving where they can afford to have a home. And so I guess I don't have a specific question to that other than it's like I shared there's all this frustration out there that, one rule doesn't make sense for the entire state, I think.
Well, that is certainly that is a challenge, but we certainly work with municipalities, and some municipalities don't see developers coming in to build, wanting to build 200-unit skyscraper-esque developments. So they don't see, you were referring to earlier, a court case on this or a lawsuit on this. So I think that when you put it in that kind of context, the law, it actually is working. It is working the way it's supposed to work. Whereas where that we are exempting those municipalities, and they're about 30 some odd, who have 10% or more of their housing stock. But it also allows the production of affordable housing in those municipalities who don't have 10% or more of their housing stock restricted as affordable, or have not attained a moratorium. So it does allow for some flexibility in planning, and we did not talk about the moratorium. So
no, we didn't talk about the. I think we're going to have you back, Yvonne, because
I'm happy to come back.
I know this is it's weird, but I could talk about affordable housing all day long, and I don't know what's wrong with me.
Well, I think you've met your match in Commissioner Klein, so I bet she can too.
Yvonne and I have been talking about affordable housing for years. I learned a lot about affordable housing just working in Darien, because my first day's editor of the Darien Times was the first Darien Planning and Zoning meeting on Chris Stefanoni's proposal on Nearwater Lane. So it was like good timing to show up, and I learned more than I ever thought I wanted to know about it. But before we let you go, I just have you were first selectman in Darien, and you actually, you were able to actually get a Democratic majority on the Board of Selectmen in Darien for, I think, the first time in the town's almost, over 100-year history, 170-year history, I think, at that point. Now you're up in Hartford, which has never had a problem getting a Democratic majority in the city council. What's it like? What's the difference? What's it like going from the most Republican town in the state to the center of, a lot of your opponents in Darien, they all hated Hartford. Just the idea of it, not necessarily the city. What's it like being up there now?
It's actually, I love being up in Hartford, and I felt that after I no longer was first selectman, I said, I'll never have a job that I love so much. And then I have this job, and I have to say, I love this job and love being part of the progress that we're making in the state of Connecticut, and proud to be a member of Governor Malloy's cabinet, and it's truly a privilege. So it's great because I feel that we're all pulling in the same direction. We have a goal to clearly take Connecticut through this economic recovery, and we're doing it together. When I was first selectman, departments and agencies, they were siloed up in Hartford. It's not like that. I mean, we haven't even touched on all the agencies that I work with, whether it's a DOT or Economic and Community Development or the Department of Social Services or the Department of Mental Health and I could go on and on and on. So we're working together to achieve our goals in the best interests of the residents of Connecticut. So it's great to be pulling in one direction. I don't miss the nipping at my ankle, but I
don't miss covering that.
It made me. I think it's made me a better commissioner, because it's important to listen to those folks who are nipping at your ankles, and it's important to recognize the other point of view, and I felt that way as a first selectman. So I'm enjoying this very much, and I'm really proud that we're having such a positive effect in the state of Connecticut.
And where can people get more information on some of the initiatives that the Department of Housing is doing?
They could go to our website, and that would be great.
All right, awesome. All right, well, Commissioner Klein, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll have to have you back sometime. All right.
Great.
Well, we're gonna.
She's
She'll let us know.
I'll come back. I would love to.
We're going to step out for a break. When we come back, Doug Smith joins us. We have a few news stories we're following this week, too, coming up on CT Pulse after this.
Walter Stewart's Market in New Canaan is your time-saving local shopping destination for the best of spring. Find many of your favorite products, from great specials on everyday items to the freshest organic produce, artisanal cheeses, and grass-fed steaks. Drop off your knives to be sharpened, grab a beautiful bouquet of spring flowers, and stop in next door for a wine tasting. Plus, their personable staff is always ready to lend a helping hand. So stop in to Walter Stewart's Market, 229 Elm Street today, or shop online at stewartsmarket.com.
Mosquitoes, ticks, gone. Guaranteed. That's what Mosquito Squad guarantees as America's most trusted mosquito and tick control company. Locally owned and operated, over 90,000 homes have been protected by Mosquito Squad using their dual protection method for season-long protection, which includes barrier spray service for eliminating mosquitoes and adult ticks, as well as supplemental programs to increase tick control. They use only USDA organic options, which are safe and non-toxic. Contact them today at www.squadctny.com or 203-893-4309. Mosquito Squad. No bugs, no bites, no kidding.
At Cabbage Patch Nursery School in Ridgefield, playtime is learning time. Using out-of-the-box activities and programs in science, dance, Spanish, Taekwondo, and so much more, learning is made fun. Aside from interactive classrooms, our center features a sensory room, computer lab, and a large outdoor space for playtime fun. Our carefully chosen staff believe in a supportive, safe environment and keeping you updated on your little one's experience. Cabbage Patch Ridgefield, helping shape your child's future. 29 Farrar Lane in Ridgefield. Call 203-340-1250 to register today.
I'm Frank Renito.
And I'm Donald Ing for the HAN Network.
Tune in to Nutmeg Sports Monday through Wednesday, where we bring you all the top stories for Connecticut sports.
From players and coaches' interviews to expert opinions with local sports editors, no one gets you closer to Connecticut's games than Nutmeg Sports.
Nutmeg Sports, Monday through Wednesday at 2 p.m. on the HAN Network.
Give your day a jumpstart with the latest news, sports, weather, and more on Coffee Break, live on the HAN Network, weekdays at 11 a.m. Connecticut news doesn't get any more local than on Coffee Break.
We're back on this week's edition of CT Pulse on the HAN Network. It's now the time in the show where we just discuss a few news stories that we're following. We just kind of hang out.
Whatever comes to Kate's mind.
Some breaking story that Hearst sent out this morning is that 3 top staff members of Governor Daniel Malloy's are abruptly leaving the administration. Devin Puglia, his chief spokesman, Deputy Chief of Staff Mark Bergman, and the third staffer, Paul Mounds, is the top liaison between Malloy's office and the General Assembly.
And the office said that this was going to happen in the fall, that they're tired, they've been working very hard. Some of the more cynical people maybe in the state have said this has to do with the federal grand jury investigation of whether or not the Malloy administration and the Connecticut Democratic Party broke laws and soliciting contributions from state contractors back in 2014.
Right, so we're going to be following that one. Interesting.
Oh yeah,
today.
definitely.
And some more interesting news. The New Canaan Advertiser had an update. Michael Katarivas writing about the latest on as he called it, jailbird, J. Michael Farron. He lost his appeal to a petition to avoid paying his ex-wife $30 million of the civil judgment that she was awarded. Back in 2010, he tried to kill her. He's been convicted of that and is now serving a 15-year prison sentence. I know this was a story you covered a bit as a New Canaan Advertiser editor.
I was there one day in court during his trial, which lasted all week long. It was a week-long trial. But yeah, he was found guilty of attempted murder of his wife on Wahackamy Road in New Canaan one night, beating her with a Maglite flashlight, one of those really heavy flashlights, after she said she wanted a divorce. And it's certainly like and a harrowing tale of how she was able to get out of the house and take her 2 kids with her, and then knock on a neighbor's door who she'd never met before, and then was able to get help, and now she's lucky to still be alive.
Right. And if we didn't mention, Farron was a White House attorney during both Bush administrations.
Yes. I'm just surprised that Katarivas didn't do a Monopoly, like get out of jail free card type
Oh my
thing
gosh,
there.
yeah, he loves Katarivas.
A little disappointed in you, Michael.
But he did try to avoid paying his wife until his appeal was possibly heard by the U.S. Supreme Court, but that petition was denied. So he is going to have to pay that $30 million civil judgment. So those are just a couple stories we're following today. You can get more on that story at ncadvertiser.com. But it's time to take a turn to something much lighter. We're going to be drawing conclusions. Doug Smith ruining engagements left and right. Doug, welcome.
Thank you. The mystery is how I'm in an airplane to begin with skywriting.
Now, I noticed there's a little bit of an animal theme this week, but let's get right into what we have. First up, is that the light at the end of the tunnel? Planning and zoning, Darien, I'm guessing.
Finally, the stadium lights looks like they're going to go through in Darien.
Yes.
The final hurdle is going through the planning and zoning, but
Clever.
Yes, clever. So very interesting there. And this, of course, I love any kind of bear humor.
Yeah, bear humor.
A bear was recently spotted in town. Has a little jacket. It's shopping, enjoying the sights.
It's fashionable, if anything.
Yeah.
And some coyotes. Is this Monroe?
This is Monroe. And they said they had multiple coyote sightings, so I guess
So you imagine that happening all at once to the same person. I like it.
How am I going to feed all these?
Ooh, and this, the Outback, the former
Outback
teen center.
You know, they've been trying to figure out what to do with it for months now, and I guess somebody inspected, said there's a ton of rot on the thing and it's going to start collapsing in on itself.
Right, and I noticed there's actually an update on that at ncadvertiser.com today. There's a new story.
There's certainly some pushback from First Selectman Rob Malazzi wanting to tear that down. How much fun do you have drawing the roof?
Such a great roof.
It looks like an IHOP.
Yeah, it does.
All right, up next, Stratford, tell us what this one's
that's
about.
their new UTV vehicle that they just started using, and they're talking about how it can go anywhere and do anything.
Over fences and homes. And I like this one. Tell us about this.
The Lane Street Bridge in Shelton, they're just going to be replacing it.
I like your take on a troll. I always imagine trolls a little more monster-like myself, but he has some human characteristics there.
I don't know. I mean, I have Norwegian heritage, so maybe I'm basing it on myself.
I think Kate's asking if he's single.
Yes, I'm very interested. All right, up next, deer season. This is Ridgefield, 12 sites. The concontrolled deer hunt will be on 12 sites this year. And that poor guy's got a target on his back.
The formed deer, is worried about it. Makes me wonder what its father looked like.
Yeah. All right. Well, Doug, as always, thank you so much for making us laugh at the end of the show. We are going to wrap things up here on this week's CT Pulse. If you missed anything, you can watch it on demand at han.network. We'll see you next week.
Have a good one.